The clock on the wall of Thompson's auto repair showed 9:45 p.m. Mike Thompson wiped his greasy hands on an old rag and looked around his workshop with tired satisfaction. Tools hung neatly on their boards, and the concrete floor bore the day's oil stains that he'd clean tomorrow. The small-town mechanic had just finished working on old Mr. Wilson's stubborn Chevrolet, and he was ready to call it a night. "Just need to lock up the back," he muttered to himself, fishing the keys from his coverall pocket. The metal keys jingled in the quiet evening air as he walked toward the rear entrance of his garage. The autumn wind carried the smell of motor oil and fallen leaves as Mike stepped outside. The parking lot behind his shop was empty except for his own beaten-up pickup truck. The nearest streetlight flickered weakly, creating dancing shadows on the cracked asphalt. That's when he saw it, a strange blue glow coming from behind the old storage containers he kept at the far end of the lot. Mike froze. The light wasn't like anything he'd seen before. It wasn't the harsh white of LED lights or the yellow of sodium lamps. This was different, a pulsing, almost alive kind of blue that reminded him of the way heat shimmers above a hot engine. "Hello," he called out, his voice steady despite his racing heart. Someone there. The blue light flickered and then grew stronger. A soft humming sound filled the air, like the whine of an electric motor, but at a pitch he'd never heard before. Mike took a few careful steps forward, his work boots crunching on the gravel. What happened next made him question everything he knew about reality. Two figures stepped out from behind the storage containers. They were tall, maybe 6.5 feet, and completely identical. Their skin had a silvery sheen that seemed to reflect the blue light, and their eyes were large and almond-shaped, with pupils that looked like swirling galaxies. Mike's first instinct was to run, but something stopped him. Maybe it was 30 years of solving mechanical problems, or maybe it was simple curiosity, but he stood his ground. The figures moved with careful, precise steps, and he noticed they were wearing what looked like matching jumpsuits made of a material that shifted colors like oil on water. One of the figures raised a small device to its chest. A gentle red light pulsed from it, and suddenly, words filled the air. "We require assistance," the device translated in a neutral, computerized voice. "Our vessel has suffered damage during atmospheric entry." Mike blinked several times, his mind racing to process what he was hearing. "Your vessel," he managed to say. The second figure stepped forward, holding up an identical device. "Yes. We detected your facility contains tools and equipment for repairing transportation devices. Are you a repair specialist?" A laugh escaped Mike's lips before he could stop it. Even in this impossible situation, some things remained familiar. "You could say that. I'm a mechanic. Been fixing cars for most of my life." The twins, as Mike had already started thinking of them, looked at each other and made a series of musical sounds that their devices didn't translate. Then they turned back to him. "Would you be willing to examine our vessel? We can offer compensation." Mike looked at his watch, then at his truck, then back at the strange visitors. Every reasonable part of his brain told him to go home, forget this ever happened, and maybe lay off the late-night coffee. But there was another part of him, the part that had spent his life taking broken things apart and putting them back together, that was already curious about what kind of vessel needed fixing. "Show me what we're dealing with," he heard himself say. The twins stepped aside, revealing what had been hidden behind the storage containers. Mike's jaw dropped. Hovering 3 feet off the ground was what could only be described as a spacecraft, about the size of a large SUV. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, except for a damaged section near what he assumed was the engine housing, where the metal had turned a dull gray. As he stared at the ship, Mike realized that this night was about to become a lot longer than he planned. But something told him it would also be the most interesting repair job of his life. Mike stood in his workshop, staring at the hovering spacecraft that now occupied the space where he usually parked broken-down sedans and pickup trucks. The alien twins had helped him push open the large garage doors, and their ship had glided in silently, settling in the center of his work area. "First things first," Mike said, reaching for his toolbox. "If we're going to work together, we need to call you something. I can't just say, 'Hey, you,' all night." The twins looked at each other, their galaxy-like eyes shifting colors slightly. The one on the left touched its translation device. "We understand the human need for simple identification. You may call me Red." It gestured to its identical twin. "And this is Blue." Mike nodded, appreciating their practical choice of names. "All right, Red and Blue it is. Now, can you show me what's wrong with your ship?" Blue stepped forward and pressed a section of the ship's hull. A panel slid open smoothly, revealing what Mike could only describe as an engine, though unlike any he'd ever seen before. Tubes of glowing blue liquid crisscrossed between metallic components that seemed to pulse with energy. "Our primary propulsion core experienced a failure during entry into your atmosphere," Red explained through the translator. "The backup systems prevented a crash, but we cannot achieve the necessary power output for space travel." Mike leaned closer, his experienced eyes scanning the complex machinery. Despite its alien origin, he could see familiar patterns, flow systems, pressure chambers, and what looked like some kind of combustion process. It reminded him of the high-end hybrid engines he occasionally worked on, just far more advanced. "Can you tell me how it's supposed to work?" Mike asked, pulling out his large work light to get a better view. "In simple terms." The twins made those musical sounds again, and Blue adjusted its translator. "The system takes in particles from space, what you might call fuel, and processes them through these chambers." It pointed to a series of crystalline tubes. "Energy is released through controlled reactions, powering our ship." Mike's eyes lit up with understanding. "So it's basically a super advanced combustion engine. Instead of gasoline, you're burning space stuff." Red tilted its head, clearly surprised. "You understand the principle so quickly. Our repair technicians spend years studying these systems through computer simulations." "Sometimes the best way to learn is by getting your hands dirty," Mike said, reaching for a wrench. He paused. Is it safe to touch?" "The outer components are cool," Blue assured him. "The damaged section has been automatically isolated." As Mike began examining the engine more closely, he noticed something familiar about the problem. One of the crystal tubes had a hairline crack, and the surrounding metal had discolored, just like what happened when a head gasket blew in a car engine. "You know," Mike said, pointing to the damage, "this reminds me of something I fix pretty often. When the seal between parts breaks down, it can cause all sorts of problems. I'm guessing these tubes need to maintain perfect pressure to work right." The twins made an excited series of chimes. "Correct," Red's translator announced. "The crystal containment tubes must maintain precise pressure ratios, but our automated repair systems cannot identify the solution. That's the problem with relying too much on computers," Mike said, already forming a plan in his mind. "They can only fix what they're programmed to fix. Sometimes you need old-fashioned problem-solving." "Old-fashioned?" Blue's translator asked, confusion evident in its tone. Mike grinned. "Yeah, looking at the problem, thinking it through, and figuring out a solution even if it's not in any manual. That's what we mechanics do best." The twins watched with fascination as Mike began laying out his tools. He couldn't help but notice how they seemed amazed by the simple wrenches and gauges, tools that probably looked primitive to them. "On our world," Red explained, "physical repair work is considered obsolete. Everything is automated or replaced entirely." "Well," Mike said, rolling up his sleeves, "you're about to get a lesson in why sometimes the old ways are the best ways. Now let's see if we can figure out how to seal that crack without breaking your fancy space engine." As the night grew deeper, the unlikely trio began their work, with Mike explaining each step as the twins absorbed everything with increasing wonder. It was becoming clear that this repair job would teach both sides something valuable about their different approaches to technology. The digital clock on Mike's workbench showed 11:30 p.m., as he carefully examined the cracked crystal tube under his best magnifying glass. Red and Blue stood nearby, watching with intense curiosity as the human mechanic worked in a way they had never seen before. "You see this discoloration here?" Mike pointed to a rainbow-like pattern around the crack. "It reminds me of what happens when metal gets too hot too fast. Did you hit some rough weather coming into our atmosphere?" Red's translator hummed to life. "We encountered an unexpected electrical storm. Our shields were not fully prepared." Mike nodded, walking over to his tool chest and pulling out a drawer filled with various gaskets and seals. Sometimes the simplest solutions work best. "Look at this." He held up a copper head gasket. "We use these in high-performance engines to create a perfect seal between metal parts. Maybe we can adapt something similar for your crystal tubes." Blue leaned in close to examine the copper gasket, its galaxy-like eyes swirling with interest. "But our repair database has no reference to such primitive materials being compatible with our technology." Mike couldn't help but chuckle. "No offense, but sometimes databases don't know everything. Watch this." He grabbed a piece of scrap copper and began carefully shaping it with his tools. "The trick isn't just knowing what tools to use. It's understanding why they work." As Mike worked, he noticed the twins making notes with their own devices, recording his every move. They seemed particularly fascinated when he used basic tools like files and calipers to make precise adjustments. "In our world," Red explained, "such manual skills are considered obsolete. Most of our people have never held a tool." Mike paused his work, genuinely surprised. "Never. But how do you fix things when they break?" "Automated systems handle all repairs," Blue answered. "If automation fails, we replace the entire unit." "Seems wasteful," Mike said, testing the fit of his modified copper seal. "Sometimes all you need is a small fix to keep something running for years. Like this old bench grinder here." He patted a worn but well-maintained machine. "It's older than I am, but it works perfect because I take care of it." The twins made their musical sounds again, but this time Mike thought he could detect a note of sadness in their tones. "We have lost something, haven't we?" Red's translator conveyed. "The connection between maker and machine." "It's not too late to learn," Mike said encouragingly. He held up the carefully crafted copper seal. "Want to help me install this? I could use a couple of extra hands. Appendages." For the next hour, Mike taught the twins how to properly clean the damaged area, apply the correct amount of pressure, and test for leaks. He was impressed by how quickly they learned, their natural precision making them excellent students. "Now this is what we call the moment of truth," Mike said, stepping back from the repaired crystal tube. "Let's fire it up and see if it holds." Blue activated a control panel on the ship's hull. The engine hummed to life, blue energy flowing through the repaired tube. The copper seal glowed slightly but held firm, the crack completely sealed. "Incredible." Red's translator barely kept up with its excited tones. "The energy flow is at 98.7% efficiency. That exceeds our standard maintenance requirements." Mike wiped his hands on his rag, a satisfied smile on his face. "Sometimes the old ways work just fine. You just need to understand the basic principles of what you're fixing." The twins looked at each other, then back at Mike. "Would you?" Blue began hesitantly. "Would you be willing to teach us more about manual repairs?" "And perhaps," Red added, "we could share some knowledge about our technology in return." Mike looked around his workshop, at the mix of alien technology and earthly tools, and felt a sense of pride. Here he was, a simple car mechanic, teaching advanced beings from another world about the value of getting their hands dirty. "Tell you what," he said, pulling up his favorite work stool. "Let me show you how to use a torque wrench properly. Trust me, whether you're fixing a car engine or a spaceship, knowing the right amount of pressure to apply is universal." As the night continued, the garage filled with the sounds of tools clinking, alien chimes of curiosity, and the patient explanations of a mechanic who was proving that sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones. Mike was showing Red and Blue how to use a timing light when headlights swept across the front windows of his garage. He froze, his heart skipping a beat as he recognized the distinct shape of government vehicles pulling into his front parking lot. "Quick," he whispered, even though he knew the twins' translators would work at any volume. "We need to hide you and your ship. Now." The twins looked at each other, their silvery skin taking on a slightly paler shade. "Are we in danger?" Blue asked through the translator. "Not if I can help it," Mike said firmly. He pointed to the large paint booth at the back of his garage. "Can you move your ship in there? It's where I usually paint cars. The ventilation system keeps the paint fumes contained." Red quickly activated their ship's controls, and the vessel silently glided into the paint booth. Mike rushed to close the booth's heavy doors just as he heard car doors slamming outside. "You two, stay in there with your ship," Mike instructed, his mind racing. "The walls are thick enough to block any energy readings, I hope." As the twins ducked into the booth, Mike grabbed a paint gun and quickly sprayed some paint on his coveralls. He had just set the gun down when there was a knock at his front door. "Thompson's Auto Repair," Mike called out, walking to the entrance. "We're closed for the night." He opened the door to find two men in black suits and a woman holding what looked like some kind of technical equipment. All three showed him government badges. "Mr. Thompson," the woman said, "I'm Agent Walker. We're investigating reports of unusual lights and activity in this area. Mind if we ask you a few questions?" Mike wiped his hands on his paint-stained rag, playing the role of a busy mechanic working late. "Sure, though I haven't seen anything unusual. Just been working on a paint job for a customer." Agent Walker's device began beeping as she swept it around the garage. "We picked up some very interesting energy signatures in this area about 3 hours ago. Have you noticed any strange lights or sounds?" Mike shrugged, keeping his voice casual. "Well, I've been using my new LED work lights. They're pretty bright, and the paint booth ventilation system can make some weird noises." The male agents were walking around his garage, looking at everything. Mike's heart raced when one approached the paint booth, but he forced himself to stay calm. "What's in there?" the agent asked, pointing at the booth. "Custom job for a rich client," Mike said quickly. 1967 Mustang. Client's very particular about privacy. Signed an NDA and everything. You know how collectors are. The agent reached for the booth's handle, but Mike stepped forward. "Sorry, but I really can't let you in there. Wet paint, and the client's paperwork was very specific. You'd need a warrant to override that contract." The agents exchanged looks. Inside the paint booth, Mike could almost feel Red and Blue holding their breath, if they even breathed. Agent Walker's device beeped again, but differently this time. She frowned at it, then looked at Mike. "Your power usage for tonight shows some unusual spikes." Mike gestured to his equipment. "Been using the compressor a lot for this paint job, plus testing some new diagnostic tools I got at auction. Draws a lot of power." The agents spoke quietly among themselves while Mike tried to look as ordinary as possible. Finally, Agent Walker turned back to him. "Here's my card, Mr. Thompson. If you notice anything unusual, please call us immediately." "Will do," Mike said, accepting the card and watching as they walked back to their vehicles. He waited until the government cars had disappeared down the street before rushing to the paint booth. When he opened the door, he found Red and Blue standing perfectly still, their ship systems completely powered down. "They're gone," Mike said, letting out a long breath. "But they'll probably be watching the area. We need to be more careful." "Why did you protect us?" Red asked, its translator conveying genuine curiosity. "Your government would surely reward you for reporting us." Mike looked at the two aliens who had spent the night learning from him like eager students. "Because you came to me for help, not to cause trouble. Where I come from, that means something." Blue made a soft musical sound that needed no translation. It was clearly gratitude. "Besides," Mike added with a small smile, I haven't finished teaching you how to use a torque wrench properly. Now let's figure out how to get your ship fixed without attracting any more attention." After the close call with the government agents, Mike knew they had to work faster but still be careful. He pulled his oldest repair manuals from a dusty shelf while Red and Blue examined them with intense interest. "These books," Blue's translator hummed, "they contain your repair knowledge." Mike nodded, opening a well-worn manual for a 1969 Chevrolet. Yep, every car part, every system, all explained with diagrams and step-by-step instructions. Been collecting these for 30 years. Red ran its silvery hand over the manual's pages, its galaxy-like eyes swirling with excitement. "May we scan these? Our people would find this information fascinating." "Sure," Mike said, spreading more manuals on his workbench. "But first, you promised to tell me about your technology. Fair trade, right?" The twins looked at each other and made their musical sounds, which Mike now recognized as laughter. Blue touched a panel on their ship, and a holographic display appeared in the air. "This is our home world," Blue explained, showing a beautiful planet with 3 moons. "Our civilization advanced quickly through automation. But as machines did more, we did less. Many basic skills were forgotten." Mike watched as the hologram showed vast cities where robots and computers did everything. "No one fixes anything themselves. It is considered primitive," Red said, but the translator couldn't hide a note of sadness. "When something breaks, we replace it. The old knowledge of repair and maintenance exists only in historical archives." "That's a shame," Mike said, picking up a socket wrench. "There's something special about fixing things with your own hands, understanding how they work, keeping them running." As they talked, Mike showed the twins how to use different tools. They were fascinated by simple things like using a feeler gauge to measure gaps and a multimeter to test electrical systems. "Watch this," Mike said, connecting his old diagnostic computer to their ship. To his surprise, the ancient device actually started reading some of the ship's systems. "Well, would you look at that? Basic electronics are basic electronics, no matter where they're from." The twins were amazed. They took turns using Mike's tools, their natural precision making them quick learners. In return, they explained their ship's advanced systems. "Your combustion engines," Red said, pointing to a car manual. "They're not so different from our quantum drive. Both capture energy and use it for movement. We just use different fuel." Mike laughed. "Guess some things are universal. An engine's an engine, whether it runs on gasoline or, what did you call it?" "Quantum plasma," Blue answered. "But the principles you use, pressure, timing, temperature control, they're all similar." As the night went on, they traded more knowledge. The twins used their devices to scan all of Mike's repair manuals, while Mike learned about their world's technology. He was surprised to find that he could understand a lot of it. The basics weren't that different, just more advanced. "Look here," Mike said, pointing to their ship's damaged crystal tube. "You've got cooling systems, just like a car radiator. And these power distribution lines are like a car's electrical system, just way more complex." Red made an excited chiming sound. "We never thought of it that way. Our automated systems see each part as separate, but you see how they work together. That's the trick to being a good mechanic," Mike explained, tapping his temple. "You've got to understand the whole system, not just individual parts. Everything's connected." Blue was making notes on its device. "Our people have lost this way of thinking. We rely too much on computers to think for us." Mike picked up a wrench and handed it to Red. "Well, it's never too late to learn. Now let me show you how to properly calibrate that crystal tube we fixed. Sometimes you need to feel the right tension, something a computer can't do." As the twins took turns learning to use the wrench, Mike felt proud. Here he was, a simple mechanic, teaching advanced aliens something valuable. Their technology might be far ahead of Earth's, but some skills, like the ability to understand and fix machines, were timeless. "You know," Mike said, watching them work, "maybe this is why you ended up in my garage. Sometimes, the universe has a funny way of teaching us what we need to learn." The twins' musical laughter filled the garage as they continued their unique exchange of knowledge, each learning that progress doesn't always mean leaving the old ways behind. The early morning sun was just beginning to peek through the garage windows when Mike heard more vehicles pulling into his lot. This time, he recognized the rumble of multiple engines, bigger than cars. "Someone's here," he whispered to Red and Blue, who were in the middle of learning how to use a torque wrench. "Sounds like trucks. Big ones." Blue quickly checked a small device on its wrist. "Military vehicles. 6 of them." Mike's heart raced. They must have picked up some energy readings from last night. "Quick, into the paint booth, but this time we need to be smarter about hiding." The twins moved their ship into the booth while Mike grabbed several old car covers and tarps. He had just finished arranging them when someone pounded on the front door. "Mr. Thompson, this is Colonel Richards, United States Air Force. Open up immediately." Mike looked at his watch. 6:45 a.m. Perfect timing. He grabbed a coffee mug and messed up his hair before opening the door, looking like he'd just arrived for work. "Morning," he yawned, facing a group of serious-looking military personnel. "Just opened up. What can I do for you folks?" The colonel, a tall woman with sharp eyes, held up a tablet showing energy readings. "Our sensors detected unusual activity in this area last night. Very unusual. We need to inspect your garage." Mike took a slow sip of coffee. "Well, I've got customer vehicles in here. Need to protect their privacy, you know. But I guess if you've got a warrant." "We do," the colonel said, producing an official document. Mike nodded, playing it cool. "All right then, just watch out for the wet paint in the booth. Got a rush job for an important client." As the military team entered his garage, Mike silently thanked the twins for teaching him about their energy signatures. Last night, they had worked together to modify his paint booth's ventilation system to mask any alien energy readings. The military's detection equipment began beeping as soon as they entered. One technician frowned at his device. "Colonel, I'm getting strange readings, but they're coming from everywhere. It's like the whole garage is giving off energy." Mike scratched his head. "Oh, that might be my new diagnostic system. Been testing it all week. Uses electromagnetic pulses or something. Got it at a government auction, actually." The colonel looked skeptical. "Show me." Mike walked over to his workbench and powered up the diagnostic computer the twins had secretly modified for him. It immediately filled the air with a soft hum and made all their detection equipment go haywire. "See," Mike said innocently. "Been giving me weird readings too. Probably why I got it so cheap at the auction." The military technicians moved toward the paint booth. Mike's palms were sweating, but he kept his voice steady. "Careful with that door. Paint's still wet. Very expensive custom job." When they opened the booth, all they saw was what looked like a car under several covers, surrounded by paint equipment. Mike had cleverly arranged the tarps over the ship to make it look like a vehicle being prepped for painting. "Mind if we check under the covers?" the colonel asked. "Actually, I do mind," Mike said firmly. "That's $1 million custom car under there, and the owner made me sign about 50 pages of privacy agreements. He's real paranoid about industrial espionage. You'll need a special warrant for that, or you can deal with his lawyers." The colonel stared at Mike for a long moment, then looked at her readings again. Finally, she sighed. "Pack it up," she ordered her team. "Mr. Thompson, if you notice anything unusual, you're required to report it immediately." "Yes, ma'am," Mike said, walking them to the door. "Though the only unusual thing around here is how much people are willing to pay for custom paint jobs these days." After the military vehicles left, Mike waited a full 10 minutes before opening the paint booth. Red and Blue emerged, their silvery skin slightly pale from tension. "That was impressive," Red's translator said. You managed to hide us using our own energy signature against their detection equipment. Mike grinned. Sometimes the best way to hide something is right in plain sight. Now, we better finish up your repairs quick. I don't think my excuses will work a third time. Blue made a musical sound of relief. The repairs are almost complete. But Mike, thank you. You risked much to help us. Well, Mike said, picking up his wrench, that's what friends do. Now, let's get your ship ready for takeoff before anyone else comes knocking. 3 months had passed since that strange night when Mike helped the alien twins repair their ship. His garage looked the same as always. Tools hanging on the walls, the smell of oil in the air, and the familiar sound of engines being fixed. But things weren't quite the same as before. Mike was working under an old Ford truck when he heard the mail carrier drop off a package. He wiped his hands and picked up the mysterious box. No return address, just his name and a strange symbol in the corner that looked like a wrench crossed with a star. Inside, he found what looked like ordinary mechanics tools. Wrenches, screwdrivers, and diagnostic devices. But these tools had a slight silvery shine that reminded him of red and blue skin. A note written in perfect English read, "For the mechanic who taught us the value of hands-on work. R and B." Well, I'll be damned, Mike whispered, picking up one of the wrenches. It felt perfectly balanced in his hand, and when he used it on the Ford's engine, it automatically adjusted to the perfect size for each bolt. Word spread quickly in the small town. Cars that other shops couldn't fix somehow got running again at Thompson's Auto Repair. People started calling Mike the miracle mechanic, though he just smiled and said he had good tools and lots of experience. One quiet evening, while Mike was closing up shop, his new diagnostic computer, the one the twins had modified, suddenly lit up with strange symbols. They quickly changed into English. "Hello, friend Mike. Thought you'd like to know. Our civilization is changing. The council reviewed the repair manuals you let us scan. They were surprised to learn how much knowledge we had lost. New training programs are starting. Real, hands-on repair work is being taught again." Mike grinned as he read the message. He typed back, "Glad to hear it. How are you two doing?" The response came quickly. "We are now teachers. They call us the practical ones. Some think we're strange for using tools instead of automated systems, but more join our classes every day." Over the next few months, Mike noticed something interesting. Late at night, when the town was asleep, different spacecraft would quietly land behind his garage. Each time, new aliens would emerge, some tall, some short, some with different colored skin, but all carrying tools and eager to learn. Mike taught them what he knew, and they taught him about their technology. His garage became a secret school where advanced beings learned the old ways of fixing things by hand. He kept their secret, and they kept his. 6 months after the twins left, Mike was working late when he heard a familiar musical sound. He looked up to see Red and Blue standing in his garage, looking exactly as they had that first night. "We brought you something," Red's translator said. They handed Mike what looked like an ordinary repair manual. "The first textbook of practical mechanics to be published on our world in 500 years, Blue explained. "See the dedication page." Mike opened the book. Though he couldn't read their language, there was one part in English. "To Mike Thompson, the Earth mechanic who reminded us that progress doesn't mean forgetting our foundations. Some knowledge must be passed from hand to hand, not computer to computer. You guys didn't have to do this," Mike said, feeling touched. "We did," Red replied. "Your simple garage has started a movement. More of our people want to understand their machines, not just replace them. They want to feel the satisfaction of fixing things themselves. Though some still think we're crazy," Blue added, making that musical laugh Mike had grown to recognize. "Well," Mike said, reaching for his toolbox, "since you're here, want to help me fix this timing belt? These new tools you sent are amazing, but sometimes you still can't beat good old-fashioned teamwork." As the three friends worked together in the quiet garage, Mike thought about how one small act of kindness, helping two lost travelers fix their broken-down vehicle, had led to something much bigger. He might not have changed the whole universe, but he'd helped some advanced beings remember something important. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best ones, and there's no replacement for the connection between a mechanic and their machine. The twins stayed until dawn, sharing stories and skills, before quietly departing in their ship. But Mike knew they'd be back. After all, there was always something new to learn, whether you were a small-town mechanic or a being from across the stars.